Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh bidvaro. We already mentioned in another program that the main mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is the sound of the shofar. You have to come to the synagogue or in your home, you have to listen to the sound of the shofar. It's Yom Teruah. I mentioned also that Teruah is sort of a sound of alarm. But in the Talmud, they call Teruah Yevava. Yevava means really crying. And there is a rabbi who pointed out that there are 3 women that appear in the readings of the Torah and the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah. 3 women that cried. The first woman that cried is Hagar. Hagar was the maidservant of our first matriarch, Sarah. Sarah couldn't have any children, so she suggested to her husband, Abraham, that she take Hagar as a wife also. And the child that they will have to have together will also be as her own child. I remember there was a physician in Venezuela, Dr. Yosef Goldstein. He wrote an entire treatise that he called Hagarism. It's out of jealousy. When Sarah saw that Hagar gave birth, this somehow made a change in her own physiological makeup, and she became pregnant also, and she gave birth to. But when her own child was growing up, whose name was Yitzchak, Sarah had a change of mind. She didn't want that her child should grow up in the same home with the child of Hagar. She said to her husband, "This boy, Ishmael, is making fun of our son. I want you to expel this woman with a child from our home." Abraham listened to Sarah, and he expelled Hagar. Hagar was in no man's land. She was with her child. She put her child far away. She didn't want to see how her child was going to die of hunger. And she started crying. And the story is that an angel came, and the entire situation was resolved. But in any event, she cried because her child was going to die of hunger. Another woman that cried is Rachel. Rachel was the beloved wife of the 3rd patriarch, Jacob. Why did she cry? Our rabbis tell us that she was very beautiful and her sister was not, and she permitted that her sister marry Yaakov instead of her. She offered herself. But unfortunately, she died in childbirth. She couldn't have any children. Her sister had 6 and she had none. She begged God. She pleaded with Jacob. Eventually, God transformed the situation so that she had 2 children, Yosef, the older one, and Binyamin, the younger one. However, she died at childbirth of Binyamin. And she was buried on the way to Bethlehem. While the patriarchs are buried in Me'arat HaMachpelah, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, the only one, Rachel, one of the wives of Yaakov, is buried on the way to Bethlehem. So the prophet says, you know why she is there? She is really in exile, because she's not in Me'arat HaMachpelah. She is outside of the abode where she should be. That is the same as the Jewish people that are in exile out of Israel. They're not together with the rest of the people. So she cries for the exile of the Jewish people. The 3rd woman that cried is Hannah. Hannah was a woman that couldn't give birth either. She had difficulty giving birth. Her husband had another wife also. She had many children, but she couldn't have any. So her husband said to her, "You are as good to me as all the children in the world. Don't worry about it." But Hannah went to the sanctuary of the prophet Eli, and she cried her heart out. She prayed to God. Actually, she taught us how to pray, that you can do that in silence, but she cried because she couldn't have any children. And God gave her a child. The name of the child was Shemuel, and he became one of the greatest prophets of the Jewish people. So we have these 3 women that cried. But it's noteworthy. Why did they cry? Why did Hagar cry? She cried because of her child that was dying. Why did Rachel cry? She cried for the exile of the Jewish people. And why did Hannah cry? Because she couldn't have any child. Everything Everybody cried for somebody else, for a child, for the exile, not really for themselves. And this is a very important principle, that God listens, sees the tears of a woman. Yet, there's another woman that cried. And you know who she was? She was the mother of an evil commandant, a terrible man. His name was Sisera. And the prophetess Deborah fought against him and was victorious. Eventually, this Sisera was killed by a woman, Yael. And our rabbis tell us, because the Tanakh says, that the mother of Sisera started crying because her son was not returning. And when she heard, of course, that he will never return, there was no end to her tears. So we see here that the reason why we listen to the sound of the shofar 100 times is because of the number of tears of the mother of Sisera. Actually 101 according to our rabbis. More than any other tear, I think the tear for the loss of a child are the ones that are most felt when we are around that person, when there is a loss. And the message is also that Rosh Hashanah is a universal holiday. The mother of Sisera wasn't Jewish. Sisera wasn't Jewish. And yet, this is the reason why we have 100 sounds of the shofar, because Rosh Hashanah is really a universal holiday. It is not only a commemoration for the Jewish people, it is a commemoration for all of humanity, because according to our tradition, we all pass by in front of God, just like a flock of sheep pass in front of the shepherd. And he has a special relationship with each and every one of them. He recognizes each and every one of them. So God recognizes each and every one of us, all human beings, Jews and non-Jews alike, so that we should all return to our moral roots. And those are the ones that will show a path that we have to follow in the future. Once again, I wish you and your family, Shana Tova, a very good year.